Welcome everyone, and welcome back to some of you to the Melbourne Music Summit and this session using Indigenous content in the classroom. If you have just joined us, my name is Sylvia Hosking and I'm the Schools Program Manager at the MSO and your host for this session. I'd like to acknowledge that this event takes place on the lands of the people of the Kulin Nations, as I also recognise the many lands from which you join us today. I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also stand with future leaders of tomorrow, as well as any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. Before we get underway, just a few housekeeping things. We do encourage you to participate actively today by using the chat function during the session and type any specific questions you may have in the Q&A box, and we will get to them later in the session. A recording of this event and all our events at the Melbourne Music Summit will be available, and a link will be sent to you with your certificate of attendance after the session in the coming weeks. So to our beautiful presenter tonight, Jess Hitchcock. She's an award-winning opera singer, composer and songwriter, an Indigenous performer with family origins from Saibai in the Torres Straits and Papua New Guinea. Jess has toured with Kate Miller-Heidke as her backing vocalist around Australia and at the Eurovision Song Contest in Israel. And in 2019, she toured with Kate and Paul Kelly as the featured artist during Paul's set in 2019. For the last 10 years, Jess has worked as a teacher, composer and artist with Australia's only Indigenous opera company, Short Black Opera. The role of Alice, created in Short Black Opera's Pecan Summer, was Jess's debut professional opera production. This role led to the opportunity to work on Opera Australia's production of The Rabbits, for which she was awarded a prestigious Green Room Award for Best Female in a Supporting Role in 2016. I'd like to say a huge welcome to you, Jess.
Hello. Thanks for having me on, Sylvia. Thanks for that gorgeous introduction. I'm going to just quickly share my screen with you all here. So, as Sylvia said, my presentation today is going to be about using Indigenous content in the classroom. And we're going to talk about using it in many different forms, mostly to do with language, as I feel like that's probably the biggest question that I get asked by teachers is about the use of language in the classroom. And we're going to go through some resources a bit later, and we'll send you some links to some things. But we're also going to talk about how to find out what Aboriginal language group you belong to, or where your school is, or where you happen to be living. And we're going to start right from the very top of what I think is probably the most important thing, an aspect of initializing Indigenous content into your classroom. And that is something that most people are very familiar with, and it's an acknowledgement or welcome to country. Now, just getting back to basics about what these sorts of things are, what is the difference between these two things? I do get asked that question a lot. And a welcome to country is a ceremony that is performed by Aboriginal and traditional owners, or Torres Strait Islander traditional owners, for people who are visiting their country. These ceremonies vary from speeches of welcome to traditional dance or smoking ceremonies. I'm sure that many of you would have been part of one of these events along your lives. And these are only appropriate to be done by the people who are from that country and have permission from the elders of that country to welcome other people there. And mostly these welcome to countries, you'll see them at big public gatherings, or even events that have like a really broad impact, or are focused on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander event. This is when a welcome to country is appropriate. And for all other times, including in your classroom, or any small public gathering, assemblies, or anything like that, it's an acknowledgement to country. And this is what we're mostly going to be talking about today, because this is an opportunity to acknowledge and pay respect to Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. And an acknowledgement of country can be given by both non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people as well. And I think that I had a conversation with my youngest niece most recently. She's in year 4, and she was so excited about always getting asked to do the acknowledgement to country at her school. And I had a conversation with her about how that's really awesome, and she was really excited to give that public speak. But it's actually also about including non-Indigenous members of your classroom as well. And I know from personal experience, when acknowledgement to countries were really becoming a thing, 15, 20 years ago when I was in primary school, I would always get up and be the only Indigenous person in my school to do that. But this is really about this responsibility of your whole entire classroom, really, to figure out what it is that you want to say about in your acknowledgement to country and why it's important. And it's also more important, almost more important, for non-Indigenous members, because they don't have their families around them constantly reminding them of what this means and what country means and things like that. So it's a really great exercise for students to be able to acknowledge the country that they're on, and also write their own acknowledgements to country, which we are going to talk about a little bit today. So things to include in your acknowledgement to country are, I would say these three things are really the most important to me. Is be as specific as you possibly can be. Find the language group from the area that you are on, and be sure to include them in your acknowledgement, and also to find out how to pronounce that language group. And a lot of Aboriginal languages have a lot of letters, and I know that a lot of people really struggle, but it just takes practice and patience. And it's just like learning any other language. You have to hear it a couple of times, and then you can remember. Also, which something that I really like is be specific about the what you are acknowledging. Also, find something out about the area on which you're working, or and add a personal touch, something to do with education, or what a music, or some sort of relation there. You can get a little bit creative, and that's my next point. Add a personal touch and adapt it to the situation that you're in. Research. This is where really going from understanding to knowing is a really important progression for this acknowledgement to country. And it's about researching the country that you are on and what you might want to consider. What are there any special landmarks in your area? Are the people around you water people, river people? Is there a mountain or a hill that is of significance in that culture? And I think one of the biggest things that I'll keep bringing back to is it's really all about forming relationships with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities that you are working on. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can actually, like, what are the steps to get to that process, and how to find what language group you're in. We'll get back to that in a little while. Um, so a basic example, this is one that I wrote for myself, and we are going to be looking at the Yorta Yorta language today, mostly in this lecture. And the Yorta Yorta people are a language group from up in just near Shepparton and around there. It's a very large area, and the significance of up there is the Dungala, which is the Murray River. And we're mostly looking at Yorta Yorta today because we'll also be looking at a piece. The composer, Deborah Cheatham, she is Yorta Yorta, and we'll be looking at her piece a bit later today. So that's why we picked Yorta Yorta. So this is just a basic example. I acknowledge the Yorta Yorta people on whose land we meet today. I'm actually on Boonwurrung country at the moment, but I pay my respects to their elders past and present, standing with future leaders of today and tomorrow, and any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people here present today. So it's important to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are amongst you, so to speak, at all times. And it's important to acknowledge them and their presence within your school and your outer community. I also acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been practicing dance, music, and art for thousands of generations, and continue to maintain and share their storytelling through these art forms. So I'm going to be talking about music today. So I really wanted to put a personal touch in there about what it is that I'm going to be doing for you guys today. So let's get to the basics of how you find out what country you are on or what language group you should be acknowledging. And sometimes those are the same thing and sometimes they're not. So I've put a couple of links here, which I will also be putting into a PDF later on that you guys will have access to. And these are just three basic websites. So it's not basic. So they're more the official websites of the language. You would have seen the IATSIS map, which is sort of the go-to map for figuring out what language group you are on or what country you are on. And then there's also a couple of other options there. And the one at the very bottom is actually a map of the Torres Strait Islander languages. I myself am Torres Strait Islander. My family is from Saibai Island. So the language they speak up there is Kalakawaya. And I think that sometimes Torres Strait Islander people get forgotten off the map and that's totally fine. But I'm sure we have people joining us from lots of places around Victoria, but perhaps if you guys ever travel up to Queensland, the Torres Strait Islands are part of Queensland state, and so it's important to remember those language groups as well. So, a really basic way to check what country you're on, there's a couple of different ways. Google is an amazing resource. So, first of all, you can type into Google Aboriginal Land Council and then your town, especially if you're in rural Victoria or rural Australia. There are a lot of Aboriginal land councils around, and they will have the name of what language group you are supposed to be acknowledging. You can also look up your local council, like your official local council, like Port Phillip or somewhere like that. Most of the time, they have the most. They will acknowledge the country that they are on if they're good land councils, local councils. They will have an acknowledgement somewhere on their page, and you might be able to find it that way. And another way that there's a couple of other ways. I'm sure lots of schools also have CESOs or Koori Education Officers, and if you don't, then perhaps that's something you can look into getting. If you have any Indigenous students in your school, it's a really great point of connection for those students to be able to go to somebody who is Indigenous and communicate whatever it is that they need to communicate with them. And also Aboriginal health organisations are all around the country, and most of the time they will say what land or country that they are on, and they're just a couple of different ways. But it's mostly about having conversations, and once you do find these people, it's about getting in touch with them and having the it's really about having the patience to create a lasting relationship with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, so that it doesn't seem like something that's just quickly passing by. And I know from personal experience that getting language and being able to freely give it out to members of the education department or people that we work with and allowing them to use it has required hours and weeks and months of building relationships with those language custodians on my behalf and on the behalf of the company that I work for, Short Black Opera, which is why some of the things that I can share with you today, you are free to use in your classrooms with no questions asked. But moving forward, it would be a good idea to create those lasting relationships with the community where your school is or where your choir is or whoever it is that you are trying to educate, really. So moving on to the first piece that we're going to go through, and I'm going to work with you guys on a little bit of language today so that you guys can come back and use this resource at another time if need be. Long Time Living Here is a piece, or a project rather, of an acknowledgement to country which the MSO commissioned, and it was a really great initiative by the MSO to go around to the 11 Aboriginal language groups that are in Victoria. So it was just Victorian based. And out of those that Deborah and MSO and Short Black Opera and also myself approached, we have 9 pieces of music that are entirely in those languages that are an acknowledgement of country. So, the purpose of this project was to give back the Aboriginal language to the community for whatever reasons they wanted to be able to use it. For the Aboriginal community could have been to use for a welcome to country or an acknowledgement to country or whatever events. And this was a really special project that hasn't been done by anybody else around the country, but I would hope that it starts initializing other conversations with other symphony orchestras around the country to work on a project like this, because it meant that we were able to go to these language custodians or traditional owners, and sometimes those are different people, the traditional owners and the language custodians. They are of the same language group, but they could be like, for instance, a language custodian is in charge of providing language, but also reviving language, and they will be working sometimes with linguists or with elders as well, depending how much language is alive and well and being spoken regularly. Unfortunately, in Victoria and along the east coast of Australia, mostly the Aboriginal languages are in a state of revival at this point, which is sad but also fantastic that they are being able to work and being able to provide us in Victoria with language to use for these projects like this. So the Yorta Yorta version, which we are going to look at in a minute, we're going to look at this one because Deborah Cheetham, who is the composer of this piece, is Yorta Yorta. Even though I am in the Kulin Nations, I thought it was appropriate to look at her work. And this is a good language learning tool for anyone and anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't recommend singing it if you aren't on Yorta Yorta country. I think that possibly there are other language areas that that the MSO has available and the language can be used. So this is just particularly the Yorta Yorta one, and I want to go through a little bit about the learning process of language and the importance of language. And, you know, on that, the importance of language for Aboriginal people is a lot of Aboriginal people, language is their connection to culture. And it's something that was previously taken away, and now it's something that they are reclaiming. And so I always get asked a lot of questions about, oh, why can't we just use it? Like, why can't it just be like the English language? You know, if we don't use it, then it'll get lost again. And it's not really our place to decide those things, because it's a point of connection for a lot of people, and it's a point of reclaiming identity and a myriad of other reasons. And so I think there just needs to be a lot of patience around what people are willing to part with and impart knowledge to you. And that's where it all comes back to, creating those relationships, because, you know, that the first initial part of all of that is respect and trust. And, you know, once that is established, then, you know, you can move forward with language and imparting knowledge. So we're going to go quickly through the language of this piece. Sorry. This is the Yorta Yorta language, which was translated by Belinda Briggs and Sharon Briggs, who are two of the language custodians up in Shepparton. And so I'll just say it out for you, and then I'll sing it through for you so that you have it as a resource for potentially later using in your classroom. If you're on Yorta country, I think you should feel free to be able to sing this at some point. And if you're not, then use it in your classroom anyway, and as a learning language tool, I think. And there are other languages, and if you happen to be one of those areas, then I'm sure that we can look at providing you with some of that knowledge. So Nyangyak Nitel Deya Imilang Wamadaman Yorta Yorta Waka. So we gather here upon Yorta Yorta land. Ina Lochpa Yorta Yorta, Lochpa Baya. In the language of music and the language of the Yorta Yorta, Nyanyak Nyunyu Galnya, Yakuramja, Yenbana Ba Parabanarak. We pay our respects to the people long time living here. So this piece, I'll just play it through for you so you have a recording of it, and then we'll move on to looking at something else. This is Long Time Living Here by Deborah Cheetham. Nyanyak Nitel yakuram ja yen bana galna yakuram ja nyanyap nyulyo galnya yakuram ja yen bana bapana banarak yen bana. So that's just a sort of annotated version of that song. Obviously, when the MSO plays it, there is a full orchestration. And so I wanted to just also talk to you about other resources that you guys can use in your classroom. And we're going to send you a link of some other things, but I know that we're going to have some questions with Sylvia a little bit later after I just talk a little bit more. But these are some of the links and things that I would suggest to listen to for yourself as teachers, and just to further your knowledge and understanding about what Indigenous Australia is going through in these current times, but also things to use in your classroom. So the list of where you can find languages are there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sing aspect of this, which is the Dungala Choral Connection Songbook. I'm hoping some of you have already heard about that, but if you haven't, then we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then some other interesting things about colonization and general books that you can use from Magabala Books, which is an incredible website that has an enormous range of Indigenous content by Indigenous authors, including children's books as well as adult books and everything in between. And then there's a couple of things that I want you guys to listen to, which you don't have to listen to them obviously, but you can, and I would suggest, and I do still to this day, is a great program that you could listen to in your classroom called ABC Word Up, and it's just a really short 20-minute little segment on ABC Radio where they get a different Indigenous person to teach 3 or 4 language words and what they mean. And it's an excellent resource to just have under your belt for your classrooms. And then there's a couple of different things like podcasts and music, and then some other things on ABC's an enormous research. There's so many things, but these are the ones that I would suggest, which is Languages of Our Land, a program, and This Place. And then a great website or an Instagram following, if that's your thing as well. I also follow this called Black Business, which is a great resource for looking at frequently asked questions about Indigenous communities, and then also keeps really up to date with current affairs, as well as NITV if you haven't already. That would be an excellent thing to be looking at. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen now and come back to you guys. So the other resource that I really wanted to talk to you guys about is the Dungala Choral Connection Songbook. I'm just going to reach over here so I can show you. It's I can see somebody has said that they use it already. Amazing. That makes me so happy. I don't know how to show this with. There we go. It's an incredible resource written by myself and Deborah Cheatham. We spent 5 years traveling around Australia, working with Indigenous children from regional and remote areas in Australia. And each time we went a place, we would go back there for 3 years in a row. And sometimes we would go for 4 year or 5 or 6 or however many. We've been to Shepparton a bunch of times, and also out onto Wattawarran country, which is Geelong at the GPAC out there. We run a program every year out there. It's called SBO for Kids, and this is where these songs came from. And we were able to communicate with elders over that time, our language custodians over that time, and create relationships with them to write songs that you can use in your classroom. And we have found the permissions, we have gained those permissions from the people that we have worked with, so that you don't have to, and you can use these books. And we have now also a great resource, which is a classroom set for anyone in schools, and I highly recommend that set. It just gives you a little version of the book that the kids can hold. So you get 30 class set versions and then 1 teacher's version, and each piece comes with a bit of art, because we want people to understand that in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, the arts were never siloed. There was always, if there was dancing, there was painting on the body, and there was music. And so, as part of this project, we also commissioned an artist from every country that we went to have a look at to create a painting for each song. So the song that I want to talk to you guys about today is Bira Mamana, which is always the hit song in the book. We wrote this song when we were up in Benalla. It's also another Yorta Yorta song, and it's a favorite. And the language in this song was also given to us by Belinda Briggs, and she is one of the language custodians who also worked on the Long Time Living Here project. And she's just a fantastic human being up in Shepparton. And we were staying out in Benalla, and this song Deborah and I wrote for I think we had about 60 kids. Oh, sorry, we had about 40 kids. And we always work in theatres or sometimes cinemas if there's no theatre, and bringing all of the Indigenous kids from all of the schools, that as many as we can take. There's only 3 people in our short black opera team, so we only can handle so many. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on that. But yeah, this song is, the language in this song is I just love it so much. So I'm going to read it out to you. And so the language in this song is Yinya Wamadaman Bayala Gulkalga Galnya Gongai Dungamai Biramamana. So the light upon the river Red Gum at sunset is so beautiful. So the river Red Gum is the Bayala. Gongai Dungamai, the magpie and the crow, are heading home, Biramamana. And Biramamana is this incredible word, that 2 words actually, Birama and Mana. And it means heading home, but what it more means is returning to the nest. And we just love that. I love that Aboriginal language can have multiple meanings and underlying meanings. And, because these languages they're such action languages, and they seem to all be doing words, and I just love that so much about Aboriginal language. And yeah, so this song is called Biramamana, and I'm going to play it through for you. And this resource is available on the Short Black Opera website. It's one of the links that we'll provide for you guys as well if you wanted to purchase the book. So yeah, I'll just have a sing through so that you guys have a version of it for yourselves. When you do purchase the book, you also get a CD, which has all of the language. So like every second, just before every track, you get Deborah, who is much more eloquent than I, teaching you all of the language before each of the songs, and telling you a little bit about each of the stories behind writing the songs. And then you hear Dungala Children's Choir, which is our children's choir made up of kids, Indigenous kids from Shepparton and Geelong, which are sort of the 2 places that we go most often, mostly because of proximity to Melbourne. And yeah, and then you can hear them singing a version of the song, but I'll give you a version of it as well for you today. I can only imagine the stories you could tell of the people who have passed beneath your shade, and the shelter you provided to the magpie and the crow became a home, became a home. Bayala, Cool. So I'd like to get Sylvia back now so we can answer some of your questions and queries. Um,
Sounds great. Here I am.
Yay.
Jess, that was stunning. I mean, it's always stunning, but I just have to echo. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the chat, but everyone's really, really touched by both the songs and also obviously your gorgeous voice. So thank you for bringing some live music into this chat as well. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, much needed in times like this, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I've got a few questions from the chat and the Q&A, and I've also got a few of things myself that I felt that I wanted to bring to the table. That's a little selfish of me, but it's meant to be a conversation as well. So, okay, I'm just reading through here. Okay, such a fantastic voice. Yes, absolutely. Question is it appropriate for us as a school to invite Indigenous artists who are not custodians of our land to share their stories, dances, and songs, or should we always try to go to the traditional custodians of the land our school is on?
That's a really good question, actually. I think it's fine, as long as they're not doing, welcome to countries or anything like that. I think that it's important to teach the vastness of Aboriginal culture. So, if you have somebody in mind that wants to come and teach a Torres Strait Islander dance or some sort of song or language, then yeah, by all means, definitely do it. But do acknowledge that it's not their country, and most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are respectful and understanding of that as well. Yeah.
Great. And you did mention before that you could potentially sing that Yorta Yorta version of Long Time Living Here as an exercise in language, even if you're not standing on Yorta Yorta land. Can I just clarify that?
I meant sort of like in the classroom. Possibly don't. I wouldn't perform it anywhere. That's not really the purpose of it. It's, the MSO. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sylvia. I don't know if that's a resource that can be shared, but they did do 9 of the 11 languages in Victoria. So possibly reaching out to the MSO to see if that your language group has been covered and you can use that. Yeah, I think it's important to keep the languages in the spaces that they are and that they are used for in this particular context, because it is a welcome to it is an acknowledgement of country. Just in case anybody asks later, the songbook, for instance, obviously there are languages in there, but there's only one welcome to acknowledgement to country song in there, and the rest are just languages within songs, language within songs, so they're free to use in that other context. And yeah, I think, yeah, use it in your classroom as an exercise of learning another language, just like you would anything else, really, like French, or I'm sure everyone teaches Frere Jacques. But yeah, I wouldn't perform it. Be my advice, unless you are on Yorta Yorta country, and then yeah, just be mindful of acknowledging. Whenever you are singing any of these pieces as a performance, and this is something I probably should have mentioned earlier, it's fine to sing them, but it's about acknowledging the language that you're singing in. Always, like, just make a little speech before you come and speak, before you sing, sorry. Like, acknowledge the language, acknowledge the composers and the title, obviously. And, and once again, like an acknowledgement with country, you can be a little bit personal about it. And, in that book, we have all the stories about why we wrote these songs. And if you have a personal connection to the song in any way, then put that into your little speech before you come in. And yeah, it's just about acknowledging and making sure that people understand that this language has been gifted by people for us to use.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really good point. It's that I think as, white Australians, we feel really ill-equipped and unsure and really unwilling to make a mistake. So I suppose what you've just said there is, acknowledge and find out, do your due diligence, and I think perhaps then even if mistakes are made, there's, at least there's goodwill and intent. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think that yeah, people are really scared of making mistakes. I'm scared of making mistakes. Everyone is scared of making mistakes. It's the Aboriginal culture and language, and especially language and its use in the classroom. It's just about it's about being open to hearing other perspectives. And it's about, doing your due diligence 100%. Do the research. Like, Google, man, Google. just Google everything. Or follow that black business page. I absolutely love that page on Instagram. Sometimes when I'm feeling like a little bit unsure about the circumstances as they're constantly changing, I'll jump on there, or NITV, or any of those. And I think that yeah, it's just about being respectful and not taking ownership over anything, and just being acknowledge as much as you can possibly can. And if there's a mistake and people are willing to impart more information to you so that you don't make that mistake again, just be willing to being open to listen to that and making those changes. Instead of, I think a lot of people make one mistake and then they're just like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm never going to do it again. Instead, it's just like, okay, we're all learning here. Let's just work on this together. And if someone comes up to you and gives you a new piece of information, great. Let's take that on board and move forward into the next layer of understanding.
That sounds great, Jess, and I think that really points to what you said earlier about you need to be making relationships and connections with your landowners, getting in touch with the council and having those relationships so that you actually do feel in a safer space to ask the questions, to look a little bit silly maybe, because we don't like to be wrong, we don't like to look like we don't know, but in fact we don't. And even you as an Indigenous person, you're saying you're you need to stay on top of this too. So it's really helpful to know that we're kind of all in the same boat in
100%.
this.
We're all in the same boat, and things are, ever changing. As it would happen, we're in a state of flux at the moment in Melbourne, and I know a lot of people have been asking me about that, and I've had to go to my elders and people that I trust and ask them about it, because just so that I'm prepared for what what I might be able to decide. And look, everything is constantly changing all of the time, and that comes because these boundaries are starting to become more important to people, and they're boundaries that didn't used to be exist at all, and especially after colonization. And now people are slowly starting to reclaim their land and what that means. And so you've just got to be sort of wary of the situation and just sort of go with the flow. Unfortunately, is probably the easiest way to say that. And just try and keep up to date with the current content. And watching NITV is always good, and just having that deeper level of understanding, and listening to those podcasts or listening to the music. Even like if you're not into reading, which I am not, I have to be honest, I love listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander music, because so much is said in that of what the hardships are for Indigenous people, and you can just sort of gain a better understanding and gauge of where people are at through just listening to people talk. And yeah, it's about forming those relationships. And if you're lucky enough to already have those relationships, then further your understanding within them. And it's, and also I think a really important aspect of all of this is it's not purely the responsibility of that person that that's Indigenous to give you all of the information. You need to go out and learn things for yourself. Like come to the table, or that relationship, with a base understanding already. Like read a couple of books, watch NITV for a month, and then so you're not coming with nothing, because there's nothing worse than and I'm just getting real with you all here, but there's nothing worse than having a conversation and that person comes to you and knows absolutely nothing, zero information, and then you have to start right from the very beginning, like literally of everything. Like, oh well, why are Aboriginal people upset? It's just like, oh man, like, okay, we're going to be here for like 5 hours. Also, I don't have 5 hours. And go away, learn something by yourself, and then come back. Like, we're all adults, and I'm sure that yeah, you should just be open to learning and listening at all times. If not, even if it's not to do with Indigenous Australia, but especially if it is to do with Indigenous Australia, come to the table with some information beforehand. And on that information, make sure it's always from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Read books that are written by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, even if it's children's books. To be honest, they say Dark Emu is a really popular book that lots of people get suggested to be read, and now there's a version of it that is called Young Dark Emu, and it's like a simplified hardcover. It's still got a lot of text in it. It's for probably like sixth grade and above, that can talk to about Aboriginal people and how long they've been on the land, and what colonization meant and things like that. It's a really excellent resource, and it's actually in the list of links that I put up there.
Great, that's really helpful, Jess. Thank you. As you say, we need to keep ourselves informed, and that's good role modeling anyway. And then we are able to pass it on to students. Can I just pick up on something that you mentioned just then? There's obviously, understandably, a lot of anger and resentment around colonisation, and it's a topic that can't really be avoided. Do you have any advice on how to approach this for young children without scaring them? Similar to climate change, the conversation needs to be had. How might we go about doing that?
Yeah, right. It's I think it's just about being really honest. As obviously you guys are. I haven't worked with small children in the past. Probably the youngest student I've worked with is like 8 or 9. So please excuse me if I am telling you information that is just irrelevant to you. But I think it's just about being truthful and about not diving into the harshness and the crazy, awful ramifications of that, but just having a basic understanding of of the colonization that has happened globally. I think that's probably also a good way to put it into context, is looking at the world globally, and seeing who invaded who and what that meant for the people, and acknowledging who are the First Nations people of Australia, but who are the First Nations people of any other country that is now being colonized. And I think for really little kids, I would suggest the book The Rabbits by John Marsden and what's his name? Sorry, I've got it right here. Let me just check what his name is. He's an incredible Australian artist. Sean Tan. Um, and it's a picture book with very few words, and it's a generalized story between like rabbits and these sort of marsupial looking creatures who come and colonize and change the landscape of that world. And that's an excellent resource, I think, and not many people know about it, unfortunately. The Rabbits by John Marsden, Sean Tan. I didn't write that down, but if you remember, it's there. And then the other one that I would suggest is The Young Duck Emu. It's by Bruce Pascoe, and it's a great resource to look at in your classroom. Obviously, read these things for yourself first, and then bring them to the table with your kids. And yeah, it is a difficult conversation. I don't envy it whatsoever. But I think looking at it specifically globally, and looking at it globally, and then more specifically within Australia, and there's real similarities between a lot of countries that have been colonized and their First Nations people, especially Canada and us. And they're 400 years or so ahead, so to speak, of their colonization than we are. So we're still in the throes of it, really.
Absolutely. Just want to get back to the songbook. There's a question here. Is it okay to use the language of these songs in the songbook and then have students create their own compositions setting the words as lyrics?
Ooh, I think I have to say no to that. This language was it was gifted to us with the understanding of where it might be, and how it would be perceived and sung. These songs that we wrote during the time that we were there, and we sung them for the people, so that so that we got approval, essentially. So yeah, I'd have to say no to that, unfortunately. Yeah,
No, that's helpful.
yeah, yeah. Just I think like just a blanket no on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. But, there are other ways, as you were saying before, there are other ways that children can contribute. And you were saying, getting them to write their own acknowledgements to country is actually, is encouraged, and it's a good thing to do. Yes.
Yes, definitely. I think writing your own acknowledgements to country is a practice that every single person in Australia should do. I think it's just like even just for me to do it. I mean, I've done it a lot of times now, but initially when I started, I was just saying the generic stuff, and now I've just realized that it's a real opportunity to show that you understand and that you respect the people and what they've been doing. So they've been caring for this land for thousands of generations. So that's something that we need to be able to acknowledge. And yeah, I think I missed something when I was saying that, but it's also important not to rush speaking the acknowledgement to country. I know I've seen a lot of people who just sort of go, "Well, I acknowledge the country," and it's just like, what are you even saying? Like it's an important moment, and like you don't have to do a big song and dance about it. I mean, you can if you want, and we have songs that you can do that with, but like it's it's about just like if the king or the queen were in the room, this is a terrible example, but like you acknowledge those people who are important in the room before you start meetings. You like that's basically what you're doing. You're acknowledging this country, and it's basically another person in the room. And if you were there and you were speaking to them, you wouldn't just rush through it very quickly and mumble under your breath. So, and you would say specific things about them and specific things to them. So yeah, I guess, yeah, treat it like it's a person in the room, and you're acknowledging them and their contribution to your time on this land. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And I have to say, I did steal yours as I was looking through your slides last week. And I actually, the process for me was quite empowering because, again, having not had so much exposure, I'm like, oh, out of my depth here. And, you look it up and you get the generic one, but there is some sense of, I've actually thought about this. I did tweak it a little bit. I didn't just steal it
No,
entirely. Um,
it's totally
to
fine.
but it is a lovely part of the process, and it made me think about what do I stand for. And I think even students, young students, can think about it because there is more ownership when you're writing these things. It's just my experience of it, but yeah, I love that you're encouraging students to do that, to do
Yeah,
their own.
definitely. Look, and if you're stuck, honestly, just jump on the computer, Google acknowledgements to country. There's 50 billion on there. Like there's so many. And have a look, like, just if you're starting out, have a look through all of them, take bits and pieces from people's ones. Like, most of the ones that are on the official Aboriginal websites are there's language that's also changing around acknowledgements to country, and so it's important to listen and learn in terms of that as well. But um, yeah, just jump online, have a look at a few different ones, and concoct your own. And then when you feel more comfortable and you've had those conversations and you've formed those relationships, then start to reassess and see, right, do I need to look at this again because I have a better understanding of what it is that I'm actually acknowledging, so I'm going to rewrite it. And that's fine. Do that. I think that's really important.
Beautiful. That's really helpful too. We're getting a lot of questions around the songbooks, and I think they're really quite important because, again, we all want to do the right thing. So we've got you here, so we're going to ask you them. Um, so, is it okay to add our own actions to the songs from the songbook? So, not adding words or anything, but just dancing,
Yeah,
dancing to them.
100% do that.
Beautiful.
I 100% reconciliation now is one of the book things in the book. It doesn't have heaps of language, but we always add actions. Yeah, I would definitely say add some actions. The only thing I'd be careful of is just check what song it is and what the language is, and have a little bit of a look and see if okay, we probably have to be a bit more respectful around that language. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there might be one or two where you have to sort of like be a bit more respectful of it, and then make that judgment call yourself. You would know, but yeah, definitely add actions. Go for it.
Great. And is that because so we need the translations to know what kind of dancing that might be appropriate, and you don't want to offend what the meaning of the song is?
Yeah, possibly. Some of them are much more slower paced, so maybe do ballet sequence. But I mean, this seems really obvious, but don't do any like pretend Aboriginal dancing. I'm just gonna say that right now. Like, I mean, that seems obvious, but some people, yeah, don't do anything that's like fake Aboriginal dancing. That's not appropriate. But like, clapping or like clicking or I don't know, arms in the air. I don't know, just like white people choir dancing.
Oh, I can imagine
Best
it
way
now.
I can describe that. I'm very sorry if that offended anyone, but you know what I mean when I say that.
And look, it is an important point, and this is one of my questions. Should we be, how much ownership do we take? And that's a terrible word to say. Like, is are we supposed to be thinking about Indigenous people and the heritage and the culture? Is it our heritage? Is it our history, or is it separate from us? I mean, ostensibly, we're truly, white Europeans who came out here. So it's not a matter of us trying to be or to do similar to Indigenous people, is it? It's just respecting what is there. And, as in any other educational context, we'd be adding body percussion appropriate to it. Yeah.
Yeah, do it. I think that's, yeah, you're 100% right. Like, take a certain ownership over the music like you would with anything, and just, acknowledge that it's not your music, like anything, any other music that you perform, I'm sure. All of these obvious things seem obvious when you're not dealing with Indigenous content, and then people get scared when you're dealing with Indigenous content. And it's still the same rules that apply. Like, there's still copyright and all of those sorts of things. And that particular songbook, which I would say is good for, I mean, anyone can sing it. I mean, most people would say for younger choirs, but I personally love all of the songs, and I would sing them if I had an adult choir. I would sing them with them. And they're more lighthearted, I would say, in terms of where and when you can use them and things that you can add to them. And yeah, that I think it's great that people take a certain ownership over the music and really honing their skills in learning the language and making sure you're pronouncing it properly. Like, that's great. I can't fault that, because they're really taking pride in learning something new, and yeah, doing it that way, which I think is really good.
Yeah, beautiful. So, somebody has also mentioned that there are common songs that have been found for the classroom which don't have translations, which is surprising. They haven't been used, as we didn't want to use songs that we couldn't explain the meaning of. Is this good practice, or should we just be attempting to expose children to as much music as possible?
Oh, that's a good question. I I mean, look, I would love to know what songs those are. I mean, the one that comes to mind is Borafera, Nara Borafera, which is a really popular Yorta Yorta song. That does have a translation if you're looking for it. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard. That's a really hard call, because I think it's probably important to know what you're saying. Like, you could be saying anything. Like, that seems a bit dicey.
Agreed.
um, especially when you're working with kids. And I think it's important to know what language you are singing. That's really key, and where that language comes from. Because if you don't know, then you don't know if you have permission to sing it. And you know, there's lots of songs that could be sacred songs, or yeah. Look, I think it's really important to know what you're saying in any context. Like, you wouldn't just rattle off a bunch of words if you weren't singing. So I think that, music does have this amazing power to bring an understanding to any language, but I think it's important to still know what it is that you are saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like the right call has been made.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions. I think I know the answer to this, but what about using a song and getting students to add parts to it, like an ostinato to play on xylophones? That
Yeah, do it.
seems fine.
Yeah, that's totally fine. This book, actually, there's a bunch of songs in there that have 2 parts or 3 parts, or and for your a cappella ones. And yeah, instruments, add them all. Do it. That's good
Beautiful.
fun.
Okay. Can we perform the songs from the Dungalla songbook at school assemblies and concerts, or just in the classroom?
If you purchase the classroom set, you can sing these songs wherever you like. If you once you purchase the classroom set, it like the 30 copies of the kids book and the 1 copy of the teacher's manual cover your copyright licensing deal things, all of the legal things. So yeah, you can sing them at assemblies or choirs. Like, there's a song in there called Reconciliation Now. I know lots of people love to sing that during Reconciliation Week. And um yeah, a bunch of other ones. But yes, the short answer to that is yes, if you purchase the classroom set. Yeah, because I think it's, the copyright, I'm sure you guys probably know this better than me, but like 1 copy per 10 people or something along those lines. So it works out if you get the classroom set.
Great. Okay, so one last question before we wind up. You mentioned before we were talking about starting up relationships with landowners in your area. How does one go about inviting an elder to attend school for an event?
Cool. Oh, that's a good question. There's probably a bunch of different answers that you could get. It would be getting in touch, obviously, with them. That seems obvious. And then it might not be an elder that comes and talks to you. They are very, some of them are very old, obviously, because they're elders, and they've passed on that sort of educating role to other people within the community, which is totally fine. There's also like PDs and stuff that you can do with. I know that there's one coming up with like the Wurundjeri Council for schools. I'm not sure how to find out about that, but I know that some of the teachers from Caulfield Grammar, for instance, are all going to that personal development day to gain some knowledge around that. But yeah, I think it would just be a matter of approaching them, and why do you want them to come to your school? What do you want them to come to your school and do? Having a sort of, I think having an initial conversation with them, and you know, introducing yourself, and then figuring out why. Like I get asked sometimes to come and do talks, and people are like, oh, just come, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like I can't just like come and be the indigenous person in the room and be like, here's everything I know. Like have like a really specific thing, or like, do you want them to come to your kindergarten class and teach them something about the animals of the area, or like, I don't know, sometimes lots of these places actually have education resources, and sometimes that will cost a fee, obviously, because that's somebody's time and money and energy and knowledge coming and being available to you. So yeah, there might be some fees involved in that as well. But yeah, I think, have those initial conversations, see if they have some sort of education program, or if they'd be willing to come and talk to you, and then and see what it is that they would like to talk to you about. I'm sure there'd be a different thing for kids, or in comparison to what it might be for teachers. Yeah, an
Sounds
email. Email's good too.
fair enough.
For that first step, or a phone call, pick up the phone. That's always a good time.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much, Jess. We do need to wrap it up, it being 6:59. Thank you so much for your time, for your effort, and of course your beautiful voice, and all the work you've done around the Dungalla songbook, which is obviously, just a fantastic resource, and lots of people already using it, but lots of people about to go and buy it, I reckon. Thank you, everyone, also for coming this evening. I hope you found it really enjoyable as well as informative. A huge thank you to our partners, the Erica Foundation, for their generous support of this entire week's event. Don't forget, you can find everything schools on the MSO website, including open rehearsals, concerts, and various programs for both primary and secondary students. And that's at mso.com.au/learning, I think it is now. But you'll find us up there at the very top if you go to the website. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 3 and a beautiful event with Dr. Gillian Howe. Her session's called Making Space for Music, the art of cultivating safe and creative space. So we really hope to see you there and at the rest of the Melbourne Music Summit. Thanks again, Jess, so much. And thank you, everyone, and good night.